Cheers.
Screen of you.
Can you see that one?
Yeah.
Is that one?
Yeah.
That's fine.
We time.
9:59.
I keep trying to.
Okay.
I know various options it could be. I keep trying.
So many like we
Good morning and welcome everybody. This is Teignbridge District Council's Planning Committee on the 15th of February 2023. Thank you everyone for coming. I've just got a few statements to go through. Should the fire alarm ring, we're not expecting any trials for the fire alarm, but please leave the room by the door behind us and assemble in the car park, please. If you've got a mobile with you, please can I ask you to switch off the phone or put it onto silent. We don't have any members of the public with us, but obviously that does also apply to all members of staff as well, if you've got mobiles on you. Thank you. Right. Would members please note that if they're not in the meeting to hear the entire debate on the application, you can't vote. I know that's a convention, but I'm just making it clear for everybody. So we'll go into the formalities of the meeting today, and apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillors John Petherick, Bradford, Jeffrey, Nuttall, McGregor, Pert, Kurzweil and Cox.
Thank you. Those apologies are noted. the next item to look at is the minutes of the last meeting. Just checking the date of them. Are members comfortable for me to sign the minutes as a true record of the last meeting, please? Can I see a show of hands? Thank you. I'm not going to vote on that because I wasn't present myself, but okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, could you just have a proposal? Was there a proposal in a second?
There wasn't. I just asked for a show of hands.
Second.
And do you want another show of hands?
That's probably...
Thank you. Okay. Declarations of interest, please. We have one item before us today, but we also are noting appeal decisions and major decision summaries. Any declarations of interest from members today? None? Okay, thank you. We don't have any public participation. I'm telling you what we're not doing today, aren't I? And I don't have any chair's announcements, apart from what I've already talked to you about. So we have to go on to the first item and last item of the planning meeting today, which is 19-01274 Connie Bear Wood in Kerswell with Coombe. The planning officer is Gary Crawford, but today we have Ros, who's going to be presenting the item for us. Thank you. Over to you, Ros.
Thank you, Chair. This is a reserved matters approval application. Planning permission for development of a single dwelling was granted in 2016 on this site. So this reserved matters application has been with us since 2019, but it's been held up by staff availability issues rather than any particular difficulties with the application. So we are looking to approve all of the reserved matters today: layout, scale, access, landscaping and appearance. The site is accessed off the St Mary Church Road. It has a relatively long drive, and hopefully the next image will show that it sits within a heavily treed landscape, and to the west of the site is a disused quarry. There we are. So you can see that there are a number of trees across the site. The trees, the site is protected by a TPO, so trees that are authorised for removal by this planning permission may be taken out, but the remaining trees will continue to be protected by the tree preservation order. The property, as proposed, as detailed in the officer's report, is large. It has a basement, ground and first floor, and significant width, length, and is over 3 stories as shown on these elevations. It is made from a composition of materials including natural stone and other modern materials. It's a contemporary design, but it sits within the treed landscape and it's not very visible. And we think it is a quality design and an acceptable proposal overall. Prior to granting outline permission for the replacement dwelling, there was a property on the site that was destroyed, damaged in a fire. So these images show some of the structures that are left on the site. It's just whirring with the size of the images, I think. So there was a more traditional style dwelling on the site where a contemporary one is now proposed. So the access to the site would be taken through St Mary Church Road, from St Mary Church Road. There is an existing access point that could be opened up if the site was in another use, so they're not putting in a new access. It is on a stretch of St Mary Church Road with adequate visibility. And that's the end of my presentation. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We do have the ward member present, Councillor Haynes, and I believe you wish to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Right. I was quite surprised when I saw this on committee, and I'm sorry that everyone had to come in today just for this one item. As has already been said, the application was in 2019. It was actually 3.5 years ago that I put in my request for it to come to committee. So you can understand why perhaps I wasn't anticipating something happening in this way. Looking at the reasons for report under 1, the reasons that I gave at that time, you'll notice that I said that the existing local plan allows for replacement dwellings in the countryside, although it is silent on footprint size of the replacement. That was what the current local plan says. We're given figures there. The previous dwelling footprint 345 square metres. The application for 506 square metres, that's an increase of 161 square metres on the original footprint, which is itself more than twice the average footprint for a dwelling in the country. So you can see what size it is. Since the application was in, there has been further clarity on the size that might be permitted, because you'll be aware that in the local plan, that is the deposit version currently out for consultation, there is a figure given in that which says up to 50% so of the existing size. So I accept, and obviously we'll be guided on the fact that the deposit version doesn't carry much weight. I think that's the term that might still be used, but it does give us an indication of which way the council's moving. The application before us is actually, the footprint is 47% larger than the existing footprint. So on that basis, it would fall within what we're now looking at as being the way forward. But I'd obviously be very happy for Ros to come back and clarify any of these points. So I find on that basis, over the 3.5 years that have elapsed, I would have a great difficulty in saying that it is too large on the basis that it is just under 50%, which might be seen as being acceptable. But I'll leave that for members to judge. There is another issue though, and members may have seen the Parish Council's comments towards the end of the report, where they are particularly exercised by the dwelling that's on site already, which there were site visits there, and it may be that other members were on those site visits, although they were perhaps 10 years ago. There was a caravan put on site not long after the fire, although it may have been there already, but it was used for dwelling purposes. So it is then the dwelling already on site, which is described towards the bottom of page 17 by the Parish Council. But I note that the caravan in question, or building as it's now become, is not within the red area shown on the indicative plan at the start on the first page of the application details. So I'm concerned that the use as a dwelling of the additional structure on the site, if this is approved, will itself have to be permitted by virtue of how long it's been there, given that time's moved on since this application came in. So there's a couple of questions there for the officer, which I'll be grateful, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haynes. I'm afraid I'm turning to you, Ros, please, if you've got comments and answers to those. Thank you.
Yeah, so taking the size point first, our emerging draft local plan is of extremely limited weight at the moment, but it is a useful sort of rule of thumb that 50% might be okay. Some of us think maybe that's a bit big if you're dealing with houses in the countryside, because you could go from a modest dwelling to a large dwelling by increasing it by 50%. But in this instance, whilst the proposed property is large, there was no size limit imposed at the outline stage, and the site can absorb it. It's a large site as well. I've put back up the site location plan, which actually the plan that's on the cover of your agenda papers is as good a plan. The caravan that has been put on site and the enforcement concerns that have been raised by the parish council relate to land that is within the applicant's ownership but outside the red line. When we granted planning permission, remembering that this is just a reserved matters approval application, if we needed to tie removal of anything at the site, other dwellings, I'm not sure they were there at that point, but we should have done it through the outline. We can't put a condition on requiring the removal of a caravan that's being occupied as a dwelling on a reserved matters approval. What we can do, though, is make sure that we give an update to the parish council on the enforcement status of the site if there are any outstanding concerns now within the coming weeks, and I'm more than happy to undertake to do that and to get some clarity on those issues. But in relation to the site itself, outline planning permission for a single dwelling exists, and this application simply seeks approval of those detailed matters reserved at that stage. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come back with one point?
I was just about to ask if you wanted to comment further.
I think it's really a lesson to be learned, obviously for members particularly, because the reason why the caravan wasn't enforced against at the time was because there was permission for a dwelling on the whole site, the whole ownership. And then when the outline came in, clearly it was a restricted area excluding the caravan. So I think the lesson there is that, you know, you go along in the belief that something would go, but the little bit of detail there for the outline, I think, is something that, you know, got missed. Certainly I didn't pick that up at the time, which means that you've then got this situation we find ourselves in now with the other structure on the site. Thank you.
Just for clarity, Chair, sorry, if I may,
Okay.
if one of the structures, if the structure constitutes a caravan on site, then we have a 10-year period for taking enforcement action because it's use of land, which has an enforcement period of 10 years. If we have structures that are not caravans that have been completed or changed use to being a dwelling, then the period may be 4 years. But we need to get to the bottom of that and have a look at what is actually on site now. So we may be in a position where we can, and if we can, we will take enforcement action against unauthorised residential structures or properties, caravans or other matters, whatever they may be, at the site.
So can I confirm that's an assurance that sits alongside this application?
Yeah, I will. I've spoken to the team already about the need for us to refresh and make sure that we are clear on the enforcement position in the wider site, and we will update the parish council about what is on the site, what is happening at the site, and what we're going to do about it, if anything, in the near future.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ros. Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Haynes? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dewhurst.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a little concerned by Councillor Haynes's. I don't think he means it that way, but the sort of inference that we as councillors should have picked up on the red line issue. And in my view, that should be something that should be picked up by our professional officers who should be aware of that. I mean, we've all been sitting here in this committee for some time, and we understand sort of things like red lines, but and I think it is a big but, this goes back to our enforcement, and I think it is a concern that it wasn't picked up at the beginning, and I think that's the point it's making.
Yeah.
Our enforcement task group, for instance, that may be something that we should report back to that task group to make sure that they're aware of that. It just concerns me greatly that we're talking a technicality, and it may be that through a technicality another dwelling appears in the open countryside. I've got no problem with the big size.
I didn't take it as that, actually.
So for clarity, the structure that I think we may not be able to take enforcement action on, and we need to be sure about the dates, didn't appear until after we'd made the decision around the outline planning permission, as I understand it. So there's we've got an enforcement complaint from 2017. So that was after we'd granted planning permission in 2016. If there is a caravan on the site, as I said, we've got 10 years and we will take enforcement action against that caravan if it is being used for residential purposes at the site. We may need to come back to you for authority for that, but we'll do that as promptly as we can. Okay. But I agree. I think that we are all improving our practice all the time. Again, 2015 application. We would look to and have on other permissions, including near Ipplepen, actually, make sure that we have caravans or temporary properties removed from a site prior to giving permission for permanent dwellings, to try and make sure that we maintain the number of dwellings that we've got in the countryside, because we don't think that that's the sustainable place for people to be living.
Okay, thank you. I've got some other members who want to come in on this one, please. Councillor Clarence, you are next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much. My question to Ros is around the, just an interest one, around the community infrastructure levy. I remember this first being introduced on a moderate sized house. I think it was in Shoreham at the time when we granted planning permission, that the community infrastructure levy charge on a single dwelling was around the £33,000 mark. I see here that the community infrastructure levy, the SIL liability for this development is £339,261.17p. Is this a misprint? Because it seems absolutely extraordinary that one dwelling is attracting that amount of SIL, or am I just out of touch? I know there are ways of not paying the SIL charge, i.e. you apply for an exemption certificate for a self-build, and if you live in it for so many years then you don't have to pay that SIL charge. So I do realise about that. But there seems an extraordinary amount of money that the council are picking up on one dwelling. Are my comments fair or not? Can you answer that, please?
So it is an extraordinarily large property, and the SIL rate outside our settlement limits is set at £200 a square metre. So when you have a very large property and a high SIL rate, that £200 a square metre is the 2014 rate. So when you've applied indexation, it's actually closer to £250 a square metre now. So when you've got a large property outside a settlement limit, then they need to pay a lot of SIL. And part of the reason for it being set at that rate was linked to the viability of those developments in the countryside. So if you're developing properties in the open countryside, they are usually targeting the upper end of the market, where the development costs can overall bear that level of SIL charging rate. The charging rate in Newton Abbot, I think, was £70 or £75 a square metre. South West Exeter, it's 125. Teignmouth, it's 80. Teignmouth and Dawlish is so that we have it's differentiated by market area across the district according to what the area's viability can bear. So if you're building a large house in the countryside, then you will have a large SIL bill to go alongside that. The emerging local plan is reviewing our SIL boundaries and our SIL charging rates, but I expect that the high countryside SIL charge rate will persist.
Now, thank you for a very detailed and comprehensive answer. That's put me right, and I know where I am, and thank you for the knowledge.
But you're right, the self-build exemption, so when we set our SIL charging rates, the self-build exemption didn't exist. So people who were building one-off dwellings in the countryside would be faced with these high SIL bills. But the SIL regulations were adjusted and amended. So if you are building your own house or having your own house built for you, you can get a self-build exemption. And if you live in the house for 3 years, then before you sell it as your main property, then you can, provided that you follow the process, you can avoid paying SIL.
Thank you so much for a very comprehensive answer. First class.
Thank you, Councillor Clarence. I have Councillor Nutley who wants to speak next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we're in the wrong business sometimes. Just a couple of things. The existing building obviously had the fire. When was the actual fire on that?
a long time
Oh,
ago.
okay. The other thing that's obviously with the parish council, I see on here they're saying there is a dwelling already on the site, which is used for residential purposes, but does not have formal planning permission. They're saying that the structure should be removed. I mean, this is obviously in addition to that. Is that close in proximity to the building that's going to be built? Or what to be built?
That's already been referred to by Ros. Just you can quickly clarify that.
Yeah, so those structures are outside the red line, so they are associated with the former palm nursery, the growing business. Yeah.
How about the planning permission of those? Is that a different thing then?
So it's a different planning unit. It's not on the site that is covered by this permission.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Parker, you were next, but it sounds like that's the answer.
Yeah,
but yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was to do with the palm farm next door. I just wondered, is that in the ownership of the applicants in this situation? Because I'm just wondering, I was there when that was opened as a garden centre type thing about 10 or 12 years ago, and it is quite a large site if they're incorporated together, and there is a separate entrance there. So would that be used, in conjunction with this application? And just one other further point. I know you said about the St Mary Church Road is on a straight bit of the road, but it is a very, very fast road. I know highways haven't got any concerns about it, but there was a fatality only about 100 yards away from the entrance there a few years ago. Probably speed came into it, but it is a very fast road, so comments on that would be helpful. But I was concerned about using this other entrance from the palm farm.
Any comments on that, Ros? Thank you.
Yeah, so the plan that's on the front page of your agenda papers shows the access road, red line being the access just into the house. The Palm Garden Centre access and that property is within the same ownership as we understand it at the moment. That's what the application submission says, but that is a separate entrance and a detached separate planning unit, if you like. So they will be treated separately. It is a fast road. I've driven on that road. It is one that we all use sometimes to get to and from Torquay. This is an existing access to a house, albeit that the house isn't currently there because it's been burnt down. So highways don't have any concerns because you're replacing essentially one dwelling with one dwelling, so the level of usage of that access would be the same. They haven't raised any further concerns because it could be reused and reopened, and it's out with their control, I think would probably be the reason why they haven't raised concerns. But that doesn't mean that there aren't risks to using the highway. There's a limit to what we control, I think is probably what I'm saying, that St Mary Church Road can be very fast and very tricky. Hopefully people will act with due care and caution when they use it.
Thank you. I mean, we have got to go with the advice that we've had from...
Oh yeah, just a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dewhurst, you had another comment to make.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So, you won't be surprised. Item 4 on the conditions. It doesn't seem to sort of specify exactly what is required. When I read the report, it talks about the types of bat boxes and bird boxes and that type of thing, but I couldn't actually see anywhere in that report that said there will be X number of bat boxes of this type and Y number of that type and Z number of bird boxes of that sort of thing. It also didn't mention anything about wildlife corridors through the garden, and of course this is essentially a woodland open country area. I might add it's just the most wonderful area, and it also doesn't mention anything about bug bricks and bricks for masonries, and I was wondering if that could be just sort of highlighted in that condition number 4.
Well, we're in the territory of reserve matters, I guess, but is there anything that we can do at this stage, Ros?
I haven't read the ecology report in detail today. I did have a look through the application file when I was signing this report off. This isn't my case.
Yeah.
Then the conditions, some of them probably need topping and tailing before we issue it. These are the topics that it will cover. I'm more than happy to revisit that ecology condition and see whether or not there are adjustments that we can make to make sure that it is more specific and also give it a bit of a boost in line with the biodiversity informative that we would be putting on in any event. But I haven't read it.
Okay, so with the inclusion of bug bricks and mason bee bricks and wildlife.
We do have notes, sorry to interject, but we do have notes from the biodiversity officer with subject to ecological report safeguards and provision for bats, birds, landscaping. So it is it's the detail is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the specifics. And I'm happy for it to sort of go ahead and everything like that. I just want to make sure that
we dot the I's and we cross the T's.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you satisfied that you have enough from that, Ros, to take that forward, please?
Yes, I can't see that any of that would be difficult to incorporate into the condition that we've already got. I think that would be fine.
Okay, so long as that's the case.
Okay. I don't have any other speakers who wish to make a comment on this item. We seem to have gone through, and I'm getting the feel that people are happy to... Sorry?
Yes, Chair, as I've got a microphone...
and you don't want to put it down, okay.
I'm happy to propose as set out.
Okay.
With those, with that, and also with the proviso about enforcement on the other property.
The other items that have been discussed. I think we've been through that quite thoroughly, actually.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I think we can take it forward with everybody's consent and go to the vote. Is it a recorded vote that we're having?
Yeah, unless everyone's in agreement and they just wanted to raise their hands. Otherwise we're good.
Yeah, okay, raise the hand then, please. Do recorded vote? I was going to say that's what I saw on the agenda, so we'll do a recorded vote. Thank you.
Councillor Clarence?
For approval.
Councillor Colclough? Councillor Dewhurst?
For.
Councillor Hook?
For.
Councillor Nutley?
For.
Councillor Parker?
For.
And Councillor Goodman-Bradbury?
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We will now move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the appeal decisions to note. And I don't believe we have many comments to make on that, but if you would take it from there, please, Ros.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't think there was anything I particularly wanted to draw your attention to on this list. I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Councillor Clarence, if you could wait for the microphone. Thank you. You had a comment to make on this.
Yeah. Yes, I do, and I don't know whether you'll take the question or not, but I hope you might, in the interest of openness and transparency. I see the application in Newton Abbot, appeal against refusal of application, and it quotes a reference. All right, and no, I've got the wrong one. Excuse me.
Okay.
It was 40 St Nick's Road, Newton Abbot. Appeal against non-determination of dwelling in garden. Appeal allowed.
Yep.
It's difficult working on here. And it was a appeal against non-determination. Are we running way behind on planning applications? Have we, because we've got an appeal allowed on non-determination, and have we outsourced about 100 or so planning applications to help our hard-pressed planning department to speed up, expedite the lack of non-determination, i.e. we need to try and determine things in the correct period of time. So I think we need to be open and transparent about this if we have. But my understanding is that we've had to do this because of staff shortage numbers to help with things, but I think it's in the public interest. I've had a resident come to me at Shawden, for example, and said, I want to do this huge dwelling, and etc. It's in the public domain, all that went on at parish council meeting, and he said, they haven't even allocated me a case officer. And, you know, when am I going to hear about this? And I've got this letter from the planning department that says I can go to appeal for non-determination.
Councillor Clarence, you've asked a question about the appeal allowed. I'm going to ask the officer to answer that, and we'll come back to your question about the level of applications.
Thank you very much for taking it.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a target time period where we're supposed to make, I think the target from government is actually in some instances only as low as 60% of our decisions within 8 weeks, the 8-week target date that we're all reasonably familiar with, I think, on householder and minor applications. If we don't make a decision within that 8-week period or a longer period that we've agreed, then applicants are entitled to submit an application against the non-determination of the application. We have it is not a substantial number of non-determination appeals, and still it's you know, of the order of half a dozen at the moment, which are in part a consequence of people who maybe have lost the opportunity to appeal because they had a refusal too long ago and they know they're not going to get an approval from us, so they submit an application, and then I had one in Dawlish where the appeal was submitted on 8 weeks and 1 day, which happened to be the 3rd of January before we'd even really come back to the office a couple of years ago. So it is a tool that's used by applicants, non-determination appeals, if they think that they won't get approval from us. But yes, it's fairly well documented, and we are being as open and transparent as we can, both in our letters to applicants and also in the information that we provide on the website, that we have a backlog of work at the moment. We are making headway into that backlog. We have a number of contractors working for us at the moment, and we are looking at what routes we can use to try and process the backlog and be in a position where we meet those target dates without having to use extensions of time more widely. It's something that is the key focus of my management team and I at the moment, trying to get that backlog down. So yeah, we've got a backlog.
Thank you for that. Councillor Parker, you wanted to come in, and then Councillor Dewhurst.
Thank you. There's actually 3 of these appeals actually in my area, and I've got issues with all of them. But one I want to just bring up, tongue-in-cheek, and Ros will smile when I start talking about it. But the one in Sutherland Close is in respect of the TPO. That's appeal dismissed regarding the felling of silver birch. She will know there have been innumerable applications in the Aller Park area for this precise type of reason, felling silver birches. It has, and still keeps coming back to me by residents, the queries regarding this. They're concerned about the condition of the trees, the safety of the trees, they keep coming back. And I know Ros is going to say something like each application on its own merits, and you know, get a report from our agricultural officer, etc. I know where it's going, but it's something that just keeps rearing my head, and I just hope that we could come to some sort of like discussion about this in this specific area, because it's causing no end of headaches for me, unfortunately. Not just me, but I just wonder if you make a comment without divulging too much.
Well, I think
sorry to put you on the...
No, it's fine. We make tree preservation orders where trees are considered to be important for wider amenity purposes. Fundamentally, tree preservation orders are about amenity, so they're about the contribution that trees make to either quite local or wider street scene. Sometimes a tree will be protected because an older tree has been taken down. So I can think of development schemes where what look like relatively small trees are protected because you've taken down some larger trees. So you might take down one large tree and then plant 3. So the new ones that go in are protected. You'd see that on development sites, and actually I can think of one in Ipplepen and Magnolia that was subject to a TPO, even though it was relatively small, because the development of some houses had taken out some bigger trees. So if trees are important in terms of amenity, then we have to consider carefully what the impact would be of removing that tree. And we would only consider trees being removed if there is a risk of them falling down, or if there is a risk of them dying, becoming diseased, and not making a contribution to the area. And that risk can't just be that a local resident is concerned that it might fall down. It has to be that there's evidence of land instability, or evidence of it leaning, or the other thing we get is that people don't like having a tree in their garden because they have to sweep up the leaves. We can't just say that you can take an important tree down because of these other considerations. So it needs to be in the public interest that tree comes down, rather than being in the private interest. If you are suggesting that a tree is dangerous, then really we need to have that from a specialist tree consultant, because then we've got information and evidence that we can act on it. It needs to be, it is a technical matter relating to an aesthetic issue. So we aren't able to agree to trees being taken down because they're inconveniencing or causing a general anxiety to people. That's not what the system and the framework is there for. And I understand that causes problems for some people, but that's the system that we work in.
Okay.
Thank you, Ross. I'm sorry to put you on the spot there.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Councillor Dewhurst, you wanted to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. So just coming back to the St Luke's Road application for a dwelling in a garden, does the recent publicity about Bristol's plans to have dwellings in gardens, does that have anything to do with the outcome of that one? And also the final item on that list, 22 0058. It says appeal allowed, but it doesn't say whether it was a committee or a delegated decision.
So taking those in reverse order, the Castle Inn one was delegated. I don't know why it doesn't say that. I think that's an oversight. I did wonder if that was a non-det, but it's a slash ref. Yeah. So that was a delegated decision. I know there was some debate in the office on that one, so I think that one was quite marginal. Dwellings in gardens. Gardens used to be defined as brownfield land, and that was taken out of the National Planning Policy Guidance some years ago. So there used to be an element of presumption sort of in favour of building dwellings in gardens. Then we went through a phase where it was seen as backland development, and there was a lot of noise in the mainstream media about it being a bad thing to have dwellings in gardens. But if you can find a way where you can deliver additional housing within the settlement limit of a scale where amenity is protected for both the existing and the proposed property, where access can be accommodated, internal and external amenity can be provided, then it seems like a good idea to me to intensify the way that we use the land inside our settlement limits, rather than needing to expand additionally into countryside areas. The Create Streets lobby group talks a lot about gentle densification, and it's one of the ways that we can achieve gentle densification without going up, because mansard roofs and those other provisions are more difficult for us. If we can provide additional dwellings appropriately in back gardens, then in principle I would be in favour of it. But it has to be broadly in character with the area, good amenity for the host property and the proposed property, adequate internal and external amenity space, adequate access and parking. You don't want somebody's car driving straight past your living room window, too close. The proximity issue comes into play, particularly in newer estates, and then there are issues of character in areas where you have large dwellings. But in those large dwellings, the villas with grounds, we do have a number of those exact sort of properties coming forward. And again, I think they can be very much on balance decisions. We've had a few up at St Luke's Road. There's some in and around Alla, there are some bigger properties or bigger plots and some bits of landscaping land that might look a little bit left over that might provide these opportunities.
Thank you very much, Ros, for a very thorough answer to that. I think we will now move on to the next item, which is just the major summaries. And I don't believe have any comments or any determinations on that. So can I just thank everyone for their input today and declare the meeting over. Thank you for your attendance.